the deployment of the existing 25 funds, since 75% of them have not been, that the appropriated funds have been actually obligated and spent out. So first question should be a really easy no-brainer. Can you go ahead and commit, yes or no, that the administration will follow the law and go ahead and obligate the unspent 75% of the fiscal year 25 CDFI funds?
Senator, this is the first I heard of it. I will commit to having an answer to you.
Well, I just say, listen, I have great respect for you, as we know. It's against the law to withhold appropriated funds. You've been supportive of this. I'll even, if we need to, I can get the chairman to nudge you a little bit as well. But it is concerning to me that 75% of the funds.
Senator, this is the first I've heard of it. I've consistently stated that.
No, you've been great. So let me just go to
we will have an answer to you by the beginning of next week.
Okay.
And Senator Warner's right. That's my next question if I had one. So.
Thank you. So let's go to the 26 fiscal year budget, where you're cutting CDFI fund by over 50%. And I guess I don't get it. These are 8-to-1 leverage funds. Every federal dollar get a great leverage return in the private sector. There was a review by which was fine, of CDFI and how they were going or not was going. And, your department has affirmed to both Senator Crapo and myself and all of our colleagues that the CDFI fund programs are statutorily sound. So if they're statutorily sound and they got an 8-to-1 return on every federal dollar in terms of affecting underserved communities, why are we cutting the whole program by 50% in fiscal year 26?
Yeah, so Senator, I understand the bipartisan support. We have created a new $100 million award program for rural communities. So I hope using that, we can rebuild the seat.
Well, I would ask you to take a look, because I know about the rural program, and I support rural CFIs, but there are suburban needs, there are urban needs, and I just really think, and I know you support what Senator Crapo and I and others do, this 8-to-1 leverage. I hope you will go back and take a fresh look at that. I think this is one of the areas where there is huge bipartisan support, and we ought to not walk away, and I'm grateful for your willingness to take a look at that as well. I want to move to another one that we've talked about. I think one of the things about our system, and we all know we need ways to improve taxpayer compliance and make things better at the IRS, but I think our whole system works on voluntary compliance. And we've got about 85% of our citizens pay their taxes on their own. I think that's a lot contingent upon their trust that their personal data is not going to be manipulated or used elsewhere. So I've raised this with you, and a number of written letters on this. We've been hugely concerned about the Doge boys coming in and potentially accessing this information. And I can tell you, I hear from taxpayers regularly in Virginia who are afraid about whether they should go ahead and work with IRS going forward. We wrote to you in April. We wrote to the acting commissioner, Faulkender, on this issue, and he basically said nothing to see here. So this notion that data is going to be protected, but at the same time, the IRS Doge boys came up here and at the staff level briefed about the fact that they are creating these tools to suck out information. And just a couple last comments. I've actually put a bill in to try to increase the penalties on misuse of that private information. But can you again, in front of us, assure us that the private information of citizens that will get us that 85% voluntary compliance will not be abused in terms of the Doge process of sucking out this IRS information?
So, Senator, what you're referring to is 6103 of the IRS code, which ensures taxpayer privacy. And as I have said, some enthusiastic people, I think, had the motto, move fast and break things. At Treasury, we move deliberately and fix things. And we have made sure that any access is compliant And I've repeatedly said collections, privacy, and customer service. And on the privacy aspect, as you know, there was a leak in the previous administration through a contractor who is now in jail. I can't remember whether he was fined $5,000 or $10,000. We do not know the terms of his plea deal, but I would support an increase in both the monetary penalty and the jail time.
Absolutely. And we work together on my bill. Last one of my time's overrun, but there are huge concerns, at least in my state, that these Doge boys are sucking that information out. And I think you'd find in individual conversation with other senators, this is not unique to Virginia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, welcome. I think it's pretty interesting that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle now, when they're not in charge, are all concerned about massive deficit spending and the impact that'll have on everyday Americans. I think it's appropriate to have a little history lesson here. I put together a report. I've given you a copy of it. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But, it shows I didn't have time to really blow these charts up, but the impact is so dramatic, so glaring, I can just do it in a little 8 by 11-inch piece of paper here. This shows that under President Bush, his 8 years, he averaged $250 billion a year deficits. Then President Obama came into office with filibuster-proof majority, and they blew the lid off of that. For the next 4 years, we averaged deficits of $1.27 trillion. First time we ever had a deficit over $1 trillion. That sparked the Tea Party movement. I'm part of that, and actually put some restraint on spending and deficits. For the next 7 years, we averaged $661 billion worth of deficits. It's still way too high, but reasonable compared to today. COVID hit. We had a massive bipartisan spending spree, $3.1 trillion deficit. We went from $4.4 trillion of spending to $6.5 trillion. Now, a responsible president, responsible party in power in 2021, as the economy recovered, unemployment came down, would have returned to pre-pandemic levels of spending and deficits. But that's not what happened. Instead, under President Biden and Democrats in charge, they averaged $1.9 trillion worth of deficits. So again, we went from $661 billion in 7 years, COVID, then we've averaged $1.9 trillion in deficit spending over the last 4 years under the Biden administration, Democrat control. And unfortunately, this is the projection, CBO's baseline projection over the next 10 years, another $22 trillion worth of deficits, averaging about $2.2 trillion. That's the problem. And Mr. Secretary, I appreciate in your opening statement in your confirmation hearing, you repeating what the chairman said in his opening statement. We don't have a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. And again, here's the chart that shows that. 4.4 to 6.5. Now, I don't know of an American family, honestly, if they had an illness, had to borrow $50,000, pay medical bills, if that family member got well, they would keep borrowing $50,000 and spend at that level. But that's what Democrats did. We never went back to pre-pandemic levels like our responsible leadership did during World War II. I think this is interesting. We entered World War II spending 11.7% of GDP on federal government, went up to 41%. But by 1948, we were down to 11.4%. They realized you can't continue to spending. You had to get back to a pre-war level. So my question is, I've given you this draft report. I want to release it hopefully next week. I've given this to Kevin Hassett. I would really like your input into this, because these are just the facts. And the facts completely bolster what you said in your confirmation hearing, that we do not have a revenue problem. We have to promote economic growth. It's a primary component of a solution, but we don't have a chance of returning to a balanced budget if we don't return to pre-pandemic levels of spending. And I've laid out a number of options going back to Clinton in 1998, Obama in 2014, President Trump in 2019. Leave Social Security, Medicare, and interest as they are, as you spend, but all their outlays, actual outlays, increase them by population growth and inflation, we literally would have a baseline spending somewhere between $5.5 and $6.5 trillion. And if we actually return to that 6.5 over 10 years, we might get down to something like a $500 billion deficit again with 3% growth. Again, it's all contained in here. I really would appreciate your input, but do you just have a comment on that? And can you give me some assurance you provide me some feedback and input?
Senator, I always give you feedback, and thank you for this. And look, as I said, I'm committed to changing the trajectory of this, and there are two ways to do it. There is through spending restraint cuts and through growth. And I think that is a very difficult calculus to achieve. We are trying to navigate that calculus. So as you said, 3% growth will change the trajectory. We must fix spending, but what I have also said is we did not get here overnight. I have gained about 10 pounds since inauguration. I'm not going to cut off my arm to get back to my January 20th weight. I'm going to eat less, exercise more, and that is what we are trying to do with the federal government.
No, you were left with 4-year average deficits of $1.9 trillion, spending that now exceeds $7 trillion when just 6 years ago it was $4.4 trillion. So no, you inherited an enormous mess. Not to even mention the open border. But I really do appreciate your effort here. We want to work with you to solve this problem. It's a massive problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Wyden, and good morning, Mr. Secretary. Thank you for joining us this morning. Secretary Bessent, in your confirmation hearing, I asked you whether any of President Trump's policies would increase costs for families. You said that there is, quote, nothing I can immediately think of, close quote. Mr. Secretary, have costs for new parents increased or decreased under President Trump?
I'm not sure how you're defining that, but overall inflation is down for the first time in 3 years.
Well, let me provide you with some data then. The answer is that costs have gone up for new parents. As the ranking member of the Joint Economic Committee, I just released a report this morning that shows that costs have gone up nearly 25% for the most popular baby items since Trump's main tariffs were imposed. This includes a price increase of more than $40 for the most popular infant seat car seat on Amazon. And Mr. Chair, with unanimous consent, I'd like to enter the JEC minority report into the record. Thank you. Secretary, with his reckless tariffs, the president has imposed a 10% national sales tax on imports into our country. So, Mr. Secretary, do Americans pay tariffs?
Senator, thus far, we have seen no price increases due to tariffs.
Well, what I just asked you was whether Americans pay the tariffs.
Again, as I told the ranking member, Walmart has decided to pass along some portion of the tariffs. That is a private decision. Amazon and Home Depot have not.
Well, let me just tell you. Let me tell you what's happened to one small New Hampshire business. And can we have the charts up here? Because you're essentially testifying that Americans don't really pay the president's across-the-board 10% tariffs. Behind me is a receipt from the U.S. Customs and Border Protection showing that a small distiller in Salem, New Hampshire, paid the United States government $2,600 in the president's new tariffs on a single shipment of lemons from Italy. And I have the same receipt for about the same size shipment that they had before the tariffs went into effect. And that $2,600 was not on the receipt back in, I think it was March. So, since you testified that Americans don't pay the president's tariffs, will the Treasury reimburse this New Hampshire small business for these tariffs that they paid to the United States government?
Again, Senator, a luxury product from Italy, I think we have to look in the aggregate, and the aggregate is showing us that thus far, contrary to many wishes, that there has been no inflation from tariffs.
So first of all, this is a small distiller in Salem, New Hampshire that employs people. And now it's got a monthly or bi-monthly expense of $2,600 it didn't have. And it's either going to, lay people off, stop producing some of its products, but its business isn't going to grow with a new $2,600 charge unless it's going to pass on the price to American consumers. So I just want to be clear, you all need to own up to the fact that tariffs are taxes, they are a sales tax. I think you noted in the Oval Office recently that the president's tariffs would raise $2.8 trillion over a decade.
I was quoting the CBO.
So, okay, so the CBO now says it. So that's now about a $3 trillion tax that Americans will pay.
No, ma'am.
A sales tax.
Much of that is being absorbed by the producers.
Well, that certainly isn't true for new parents. In addition to the 5 popular products on Amazon that new parents need, there's another, we did another analysis on a baby list registry. New parents in America will pay total over the next year about $875 more for their products than they would have paid before the president's tariffs. Now, lastly, I just want to note that the CBO has made clear that the Republican budget bill will take away health care from millions and millions of Americans, both Medicaid coverage and the Affordable Care Act coverage. Not to mention, it will trigger a $500 billion cut to Medicare that will impact providers and rural hospitals. And it will add trillions of dollars to the national debt. So, Mr. Secretary, this is all to pay for massive tax cuts to millionaires and billionaires. Why, sir, do you need a tax cut at the expense of health care for millions of Americans?
Well, I would dispute those numbers. 1.4 million illegal aliens receive Medicaid.
But the CBO, first of all, they don't receive federal Medicaid dollars. And secondly, the CBO says without counting that, it's still, I think, 11 or 12 million Americans who are going to have their health care ripped away so that people in your income bracket can get massive tax breaks. I think that's un-American, and I think that's unfair, and I think the American people understand that too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman, just 10 seconds. Senator Hassan, thank goodness for bringing tariff receipts.
Senator Cantwell.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you, Secretary Bessent. There was the Wall Street Journal seems to be doing a daily editorial about the president's trade policy. Yesterday or maybe it's today, about the strategy or lack of strategy. So I just wanted to see if I could, thank you. I wanted to see if I could get your thoughts on that in the sense of, do you believe in a rules-based trade regime?
I believe that the international economic system has failed the American workers, Senator. And for too long, we have adhered to a system that does not work. And I believe in Einstein saying that doing the same thing again and again and expecting a different outcome is the very definition of insanity.
Okay, so I'm trying to get a philosophy here, but I think you just gave it to me, so I guess you just gave it to me. I don't understand how we in the United States don't win without saying that we're going to have a rules-based system. I mean, part of how we win is we get more people on our side about the rules and set the rules and then make everybody adhere to them. So if it's not rules-based, then it becomes more ad hoc in the process, and that's why I think it is troubling and hard to follow. So I guess I don't need to ask more about multilaterals, because I don't know. Do you think the administration believes in multilaterals?
I believe that we attempt to use multilaterals, but I believe that it has failed the American people. We have these gigantic trade deficits. There is something called the China shock, and workers were left behind, and working Americans have suffered because of this. So, here, Senator, as an example, China, the second largest economy in the world, in this multilateral system that you seem to like, is considered a developing country. Under what measure are they a developing country?
I personally believe in bilaterals, multilaterals, but I represent a very trade-dependent state, so I want to open more markets, and I also believe that the economy is way bigger outside the United States than inside the United States. So I'm just trying to get what the philosophy is, of the administration. But you've answered 2 questions, very helpful in that. Can I ask you a few more? One, I wanted to know whether the investment tax credit, we have a investment tax credit that we made as part of the CHIPS and Science Act. That is the 48D Advanced Manufacturing Investment Credit. And these are important for us in our competitiveness. And do you believe that this 48D tax credit should be extended?
I'm unfamiliar with that. I will get back to you, but I would note that I believe it's substantial that it has not worked. That we
Well, it
have,
hasn't been in place very long. Hasn't been in place very long. So
what-
part of CHIPS and Science was, let's attract this sector in competition to what other countries were doing back to the United States. And so there were investments that did that, but there was also a tax credit to help level the playing field against those other countries to make sure the United States was receiving that investment in the United States. So just if you could.
Well, I will get back to you, but I believe that may have also included many bells and whistles that even Secretary Raimondo experienced or expressed great frustration in making this provision work.
On the 48D tax credit, do you gentlemen, I think you're both supportive of it. I don't think that's right, is there?
This may be the one that Senator Wyden and I got in the bill.
Yes, so I'm just, okay. Well,
Okay.
maybe we'll give the secretary a little more familiarity and you
Well,
can
if
come
you
back.
give me more familiarity,
yeah.
I may be conflating it with the CHIPS Act.
Yeah, okay. TikTok, next week is the 90 days are up. And clearly China is trying to make this part of the negotiation, but we would like the law to be enforced. We passed it. What is your, where are we with meeting this deadline that was set next week? And what do you think is the, how does this relate to the broader negotiations?
I have no visibility into TikTok. I can tell you it was not discussed at the meetings in London.
Okay. So we will try to get some information from somebody else in the administration about that. But next Friday, I think, is the deadline, and the Chinese keep seeming to use it as some sort of, so it's good to know that they didn't bring it up. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, thank you for taking the time to be here today. And I want to say thank you for the outstanding work that you have done on behalf of our nation as you have tried to help with trade negotiations, as you have looked at policy that affects each and every one of us. I do want to talk a little bit about economic growth and tax fairness, tax relief. I think as we look at extending the TCJA, and of course, it's interesting that many people don't realize that this is really a Tax Cut and Jobs Act 2.0 that we are debating and we are getting ready to pass. And we all know the CBO is consistently wrong when they give us numbers. They use static scoring. They do not use dynamic scoring. They never assume that taking an action is going to give you a positive reaction. And it causes the CBO to be wrong. And we repeatedly see this. We chuckle about it sometimes, and it's why people like me think that we need to have a range and look at what CBO says and then what other outside entities have. But when we talk about economic growth and we look at what happened in our nation after 2018, and then we look forward as to what has happened, we know that tax receipts last year were at their highest, and we know that much of that came because of the TCJA's passage, and that we need to make those cuts permanent
Yes, ma'am.
so that we continue and we spur economic growth. But I would like for you just to talk for a moment about, as you look at this and look at permanence, the difference that that will make in giving individuals and mom and pop businesses on main streets in Tennessee. Most of our jobs are small businesses
Well, first-
addressing these pass-throughs. So I'd love for your comment on that.
Well, first of all, Senator, I'd like to congratulate you on what I would call the Tennessee economic miracle in terms of, I was recently in Nashville, and it's just all the hallmarks of a boomtown with controlled growth, prosperous, the business community, happy citizens, and everyone in the income distribution doing well. Permanence is essential, and when we pass the one big beautiful bill, what will happen here is we will no longer be talking about tax cuts. We will be saying that this is the permanent law of the land.
Policy.
Just as now, we are not discussing the corporate tax rate. That was made permanent. That had brought home a huge amount of tax revenue from overseas subsidiaries. We no longer see these so-called inversions. I talk to companies almost daily as the CEOs come in to see me, and they tell me that they are paying a much higher percent of their global income in the United States because of the certainty in the corporate tax rate. Once we make these provisions permanent, I believe we can see an acceleration. We will continue to make the United States the best destination for capital to start your business in the country. And importantly, I think that now it will be an opportunity for Main Street, because unlike big corporations, that families, individuals who want to start small businesses will now have great assurity, and we could see a Main Street flourishing thanks to this permanence. And whether it is the increased expensing again, whether it is certainty, because for a Fortune 500 company to make a capital allocation does not threaten their viability. For an individual, for a mother to try to start a business, that she needs to know that she has permanence and certainty, and I think that we can create a whole new age of entrepreneurship.
I agree with that. I appreciate your comments about Nashville. One of the things that has helped us in Tennessee is when I was in the state Senate, I led the fight against imposition of a state income tax. And then we made no state income tax permanent by an amendment to our state constitution. And being given to that permanence in policy has served our state very well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Good, and I would hope you would plan a trip to Columbia, South Carolina, and speak with the governor and the assembly there about doing the same.
Thank you, Senator Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I want to ask about the Republican big, beautiful bill, which will knock about 16 million people off their health care coverage and cut programs that keep groceries cheaper for millions of families in order to try to pay for about $4 trillion in tax giveaways that are mostly going to be sucked up by millionaires, billionaires, and wealthy corporations. So, Mr. Bessent, Secretary Bessent, I'd like to start with a very simple question. Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
They're varying scoring on that, Senator Warren.
You're the Secretary of the Treasury, so I'm asking you. What is your view? Will this bill increase or decrease the deficit?
It is my view that over the 10-year window, it will decrease.
You know, do you have anybody who agrees with you on this?
Yes, ma'am.
Let me ask my question.
Okay.
every credible independent expert agrees that Trump and the Republicans' big, beautiful bill would add trillions of dollars to the national debt and would not even come close to paying for itself. The nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, the Penn-Wharton budget model, and the Yale Budget Lab all agree on this, and they're looking at 10-year windows, thank you. So do the Conservative Tax Foundation and Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, conservative groups. Even Elon Musk and the Wall Street Journal are criticizing the bill for ballooning the national debt. The only people who are saying publicly that it's not going to add to the national debt are you, Donald Trump, the Republicans in Congress. Do you have an independent group that has put forward numbers that disagrees with all of these conservative groups and disagrees with the Wall Street Journal on this?
Well, Senator, interesting to see you aligned with Elon Musk, but if I add...
You're no more shocked than I am.
If we want to take the full congressional budget scoring, they predict, and I don't agree with their methodology, they predict a $2.4 trillion deficit. But
Okay, so the answer to the question is yes.
No, but may I finish? They include that, but they've also scored $2.8 trillion in tariff income. So even in Washington, D.C. math,
Okay, so-
in Washington, D.C. math, that is a $400 billion surplus.
Okay, so let me make sure I understand. This bill, you admit, will increase the deficit by $2.4 trillion, but you think there will be another bill and another set of agreements that somehow materialize, haven't materialized so far, don't have any statutory authority, but that will make up the difference. So the answer to the original question, will this bill increase or decrease the deficit? I think you just said it will increase. This bill increases the deficit.
No, I want to use all the CBO scoring, and you can't take one without the other. I don't agree with the CBO.
One is the law that we are scoring, the bill that is in front of us. We don't have a tariff bill in front of us to score. Mr. Secretary, let me go on to the second question. You have said that government spending is, quote, out of control. You have also called government spending, quote, unsustainable. In fact, in the name of fiscal responsibility, you're working with the Republicans on this big, beautiful bill to pass the biggest cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act in American history. So, Mr. Secretary, help me understand here. Why is the national debt so very important that you're trying to kick 16 million people off their health insurance, but increasing the national debt doesn't seem to matter if you're cutting taxes for billionaires and billionaire corporations?
Well, first of all, a huge portion of this goes to family-owned businesses that are pass-through entities that are below that level, Senator, and I am sure you share my goals of Main Street prosperity.
You know, I'm glad to do tax cuts for people of modest means. The question I'm asking is, why does the deficit not matter to you? We're talking about knocking 16 million people off their health care, but it matters not, it does matter to you if we're knocking people off their health care, but not.
Well, first of all, that figure is overstated by 5.1 million. That is amount not attributable to provisions in this bill.
So you think it's okay just to knock 10 million people off their health care?
Well, first of all, let's set that straight. Work requirements account for 8 million of CBO's claim number. Again, we're creating an economy that promotes and rewards.
It's clear, Secretary Bessent, that you don't want to answer the question.
No, Senator, I am answering it.
No, you're not.
And what I want is for Medicaid to be used for mothers and children as it was meant, not for 1.4 million illegal aliens, not for able-bodied people.
Medicaid is not used for people who are not documented. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say here, the part that troubles me the most is that the Secretary is deeply worried about the deficit and is willing to knock 16 million, or as he says, merely 11 million people off their health care. Matters so much, but it doesn't matter so much if you're cutting taxes for billionaires. Then it's okay to run up a big deficit. I think that's wrong.
We do have some differences of opinion. However, we also have a time crunch. I'm going to ask the remaining senators and including any of mine who show up, to stick with the 5 minutes, please. And next is Senator Smith.
Thank you, Chair Caripo, and I will stay within my 5-minute allotment.
Thank you.
I want to just start actually out by making an observation, which is that there seems to be an argument here today, the Republican argument, that somehow we can't give middle-class tax cuts without also giving big tax breaks to billionaires. So I just want to be clear, I think I probably speak for everybody in my caucus, that Democrats want lower taxes for middle-class, working-class people. We just don't think that the price for that should be giving, in this case, the top 0.1% of income earners $400,000 in tax breaks while we're taking health insurance away from 16 million Americans because of Medicaid and because of the Affordable Care Act changes and cutting nutrition support. So I just want to be clear about that. That is, the choice is not no tax breaks to middle-class Americans, because we're in support of that. But I want to ask you, Secretary Bessent, I want to follow up a bit on the questions that Senator Warren was asking. One of the features of the big, beautiful bill is significant, I would argue historic, cuts to Medicaid. You no doubt know that Medicaid is the largest health insurance payer in the United States. That's according to the American Hospital Association. It's the largest provider of mental health care coverage in this country. What percentage do you think is people on Medicaid that can work, do work? Do you have any thought? Do you know what that percentage is? I'm trying to...
Well, work requirements account for 8 million of the CBO's claim numbers, so they seem to think that 8 million people could come off.
So I'll tell you, this is data from the Kaiser Family Foundation in 2023. 92% of Medicaid adults under age 65 are working already. And so what is happening here is the big, beautiful bill is making it so much harder for people to get the health care that they deserve that they just give up. But I want to ask you what impact you think this is going to have on the economy. So you've got health insurance that is taken away from 16 million Americans. My question to you is what happens next? Because, the data shows that when people lose their health insurance, uncompensated care goes up. That's the issue with rural hospitals. Medical debt goes up, people delay care, and they ration their medications, people get sicker. So this has a direct impact on medical debt. Do you have an idea what the current medical debt is in the United States?
I do not, but I will tell you that I believe that that number you're giving is overstated by 5.1 million, and it's simply the Democrats' scheduled expiration of Obamacare subsidies, and you should have extended that when you were in control.
Okay,
and
I'm not going to argue with you about whether it's, how many multiple millions of Americans are going to lose their health insurance.
I like precision in numbers.
Well, I will believe in the precision of my numbers, okay, Secretary Bessent, but I can give you some precision about what the medical debt is in the United States. It is $220 billion. That is, again, according to the American Hospital Association. So let me ask you, how do you assess the impact of additional medical debt on American families, Minnesota families? What impact do you think that has? Because it seems to me to be pretty significant.
Well, Senator, we are trying to bend the curve on medical cost. And I believe that the medical expenses are out of control. We have seen
but you're not controlling medical expenses by taking insurance away from people. You're just shifting the cost to hospitals and individuals and uncompensated care.
We are trying to make sure that individuals who can work do, and we are trying to get the program back to the mothers and children it was meant for.
Mr. Secretary Bessent, the question I want to try to get you to hone in on is, can you see that if we take insurance away from people, medical debt is going to go up, and that is bad for families, and it is bad for our economy because people are going to be burdened with additional debt.
It will be good for the economy for people to come back into the workforce.
But Mr. Secretary, nearly everybody who can work, who is on Medicaid, does work. And in fact, we've seen, I have no doubt, I won't get in the way of Senator Warnock, who I'm quite sure will want to talk about this as well because of the experience with Georgia. You're not saving money. You're just shifting cost to other places by taking health insurance away from people. Mr. Chair, I will close here and give back my 16 seconds.
Thank you, Senator Smith. And for the remaining senators who came after my last announcement, we are under a time pressure here, and so I've asked all senators to please stick rigidly to your 5 minutes. And next is Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Bessent, I hope you help me stick to the 5 minutes. Mr. Chairman, before I begin, I just want to share to you and to the ranking member that I hope this committee will soon welcome Secretary Kennedy before the committee as well. There are many pressing questions, especially from those of us that come from states where there's been a measles outbreak. He's been impossible to get in touch with. He doesn't respond to letters, all the rest. I hope we can work together to get him here. Secretary Bessent, we've talked about the 333 plan a few times. And this included, if I remember correctly, not just with our personal, private conversations, but also in this committee, that it included reducing the deficit to 3% of the gross domestic product as well. Secretary Bessent, is it true that the United States bond rating was just downgraded? Yes or no would work.
One of the agencies did lower the U.S. bond.
So, Mr. Secretary, if you need it, I'll give you the article. It's right here. The United States rating was downgraded. The answer is yes. I hope you can help me stick to 5 minutes, please.
The answer is yes, and
I appreciate that.
Secretary,
Mr. Secretary, if I may,
Larry Summers categorized the bond downgrades as lagging.
Mr. Chairman, can I get an extra minute? Can we tell the witness to please work with us on this 5 minute thing?
No, let's just please keep moving quickly.
Please work with me on this, sir, so we can get through this as quickly as we can. Yes or no, is it still your goal to reduce the deficit to 3% of GDP?
As I said, something that starts with a 3 by the end of President Trump's second term.
Is the answer yes?
That would be a yes.
Appreciate that. Yes or no, did the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office report that the so-called big, beautiful bill would add $2.4 trillion to the deficit?
The CBO did that and added 2.8 of tariff income.
Appreciate that. Well, we'll get there. Yes or no, does adding $2.4 trillion to the deficit advance your goal of reducing the deficit to 3% of GDP?
I think that's the false statement, so I'm not going to answer it.
You disagree with the CBO score?
Aggressively.
Huh? Well, here's a CBO score. If you want to see it, I'll give it to you.
Okay, and what, I'm not sure.
Yes or no?
I'm not sure how you responded to the CBO score and Larry Summers' warning on the budgets that were passed 2 years ago.
Mr. Secretary, yes or no, is it still your goal to reduce the deficit to 3% of GDP?
As I said, to something that starts with a 3 by 2028.
Appreciate that. The Republican tax scam also steals $800 billion from Medicaid, almost $300 billion from the Affordable Care Act. Yes or no, will that impact Americans' health care benefits?
Again, it doesn't give a yes or no answer. It doesn't lend itself to a yes or no answer.
Well, the answer is yes. 16 million Americans will lose their coverage because of these cuts. I can cite that as well.
Well,
according to the congressional budget, Mr. Secretary, I didn't ask a question.
Then why ask if you have the answer?
Mr. Chairman, can I get your help here? According to the Congressional Budget Office, the Republican tax scam cuts $285.7 billion from the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program known as SNAP. Yes or no? Will those cuts make it easier for children, veterans, seniors, folks with disabilities, parents, and grandparents to put food on the table?
Again, that does not lend itself to a yes or no answer. You seem to have the answer, so I'll just take it from you.
Well, Mr. Bessent, the American people have told everybody here that's not a billionaire that the answer is no. I'd invite you to come on down and visit some of these food banks.
The American people told what they wanted on November 5th.
You know what folks back home are saying, Mr. Bessent, that they voted for this president and said this is not what they signed up for. Well, he promised he would not touch our Medicaid. He promised he would not go after Medicare. He said to all the folks over here that have a vote, keep your hands off the nutritional food programs. And you know what they've done? The exact opposite, sir. You know the truth. The American people just want the truth, Mr. Secretary.
Sir,
let me go on here.
You get to have another referendum in 2026
let me go on here, though, Mr. Secretary. Let me go on here. Let me ask you about the tariffs, since you brought that up as well. Do you believe that the tariffs are going to cover the cost of the big, beautiful bill?
I believe, again, you seem to like CBO scoring, so CBO scoring says 2.8 trillion of tariff income.
Well, surprise, surprise, Mr. Secretary, this is not from CBO, this is from a conservative think tank. They say no, that's a lie. Mr. Secretary, I think the American people just deserve the truth here. Like, that's all that we're trying to get at here. Sorry to be so abrupt with this line of questioning here. Let's just be honest with folks so that they can plan their lives out. People that are on Medicaid, Medicare beneficiaries, or on food programs, let's just be honest with them so that they can make plans. The farmers and ranchers who entered into contracts a year ago that had that pulled out from under them, be honest with them so they can plan. All these small businesses, that's all we're asking. Thank you for the time, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Warnock.
Thank you very much, Brother Chairman. Secretary Bessent, Georgians are deeply worried about the economy. Costs continue to skyrocket for families. Markets are volatile. Investors are dumping U.S. Treasuries. The warning lights in our bond market are flashing, and Moody's just downgraded our credit rating for the first time in over 100 years. While this administration's tariffs policies are largely responsible, the $30 trillion national debt is still the biggest long-term threat to our economy. Just last year, we paid nearly $1 trillion in interest on the debt alone, more than the federal government spent on educating and feeding our children. Secretary Bessent, are you concerned about the trillions this Republican tax bill will add to the debt?
I am concerned about the stock of debt that we inherited. And Senator, I'm going to have to correct you. Costs have not skyrocketed. We had the first decrease in inflation in April. The inflation numbers this week were 0.1%. 0.1%. Markets are up on the year in the U.S. Tariff income is substantial. And the U.S. is the only major bond market where the 10-year yield, the 10-year yield is lower now than it was on January 1st.
You don't
not
agree?
Germany, not Japan.
Sir, you don't agree that this is going to add trillions to the debt? I didn't say that is your testimony. I think I heard it earlier. I'm looking at numbers from the right-leaning tax foundation, which says the bill will increase the debt by $1.7 trillion. That's the right-leaning tax foundation that says that. The Conservative Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget says that the cost is up to $5 trillion, and the nonpartisan CBO, which has served as an inconvenient reality check for both parties, says that the bill will cost $3 trillion.
No, sir, it says 2.4, and it also says there'll be 2.8 trillion of tariff income.
So they all agree that this is going to add trillions of dollars to the national debt. Here's the thing. I think most Democrats, including me, support extending the 2017 tax cuts for the middle class and for the working class. In fact, I think we should go further than this Republican bill on the child tax credit. You talked earlier about children. I think we ought to center children. We ought to take on child poverty in this country, which we did when we passed the expanded child tax credit. We are just not willing, I'm certainly not willing, to cut 16 million people, up to 16 million people off of health care and explode the debt to give tax breaks to millionaires and billionaires. 71% of the people on Medicaid in Georgia are children. 71%. If we extended the tax cut for those making, for everybody except those making over $400,000, we wouldn't have to be kicking all of these people off of health care. We wouldn't have to have these huge cuts.
Senator,
Let me finish.
I will.
Well, let me finish. We wouldn't have to cut all of these people off of SNAP. We wouldn't have to cut all of these people off of health care if we would extend the tax cuts for everybody except those making over $400,000 a year. Now, that is what Congress should do, and I think that's what it did when it was extending the Bush tax cuts in 2012. It was a bipartisan deal, reasonable, cut taxes for everybody except the wealthiest Americans. Secretary Bessent, if Republicans fail to pass their big ugly bill, would you be willing to work with Congress on a Plan B bipartisan tax bill, one that extends the Trump tax cuts for everybody but the wealthiest, so that we don't have to kick 16 million people off of health care and take food from hungry children.
Well, sir, I believe the bill will pass, and I believe that everything you've talked about decimates small business, and one of the reasons that we have seen Main Street not flourish is the lack of certainty, because the propensity of small business owners make more than $400,000, and they file through the 1099 program, so they could be in the 800 to 1.5 billion range. I want to see small business flourish, not more government dependency, Senator.
I think kicking 16 million people off of health care is a drag on the economy. It's a drag on small businesses, and I can quickly tell you that in Georgia, where they're doing this work reporting requirements program, and that's what it is, it's reporting. They're not incentivizing work. They're kicking people off of health care. Most of the costs have gone towards the administration of the program. We got 500,000 people in the health care coverage gap. They covered 7,000 people. I think that's pathetic, and I think we can do better than that.
Well, I do too. I think able-bodied people should work.
We certainly shouldn't replicate that to the whole country.
I think able-bodied people should work. I think the benefit should go to Americans. And as you said, if 75% of
the way to help able-bodied people to work is not to take their health care, sir. Thank you so much.
I will remind all senators that we're under a time crunch, and I'm asking all senators to stay to their 5 minutes. Senator Welch.
I'm forewarned. Thank you. Do my best. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Is it the position of the Department of the Treasury that the cost of these tariffs will not be borne by the consumers of this country?
It is the empirical evidence so far that they have not been, and we think that it is likely that they do not have to be.
So when Walmart says it's raising prices to reflect the increased cost that they have to pay for the product as a result of the tariff, you disagree with that?
I agree that Walmart will do what is best for their customer, and as I have repeatedly said, this is not an advertisement for Amazon or Home Depot, but they've announced that they will not be raising prices, so my family will be shopping there.
So when I talk to a manufacturer in Vermont that has 300 employees, and they are now paying more for steel and aluminum components, and they tell me with their margins that they will have to increase the price to the ultimate consumer. You disagree with that manufacturer from Vermont?
I agree that the economy, or believe that the economy is a diverse ecosystem, and for the manufacturer you're talking to in Vermont, that there will be price decreases elsewhere, and that I was at a rally in Pittsburgh, and there will be more steel jobs.
Well, that's a different issue. I'm talking about who's going to pay the price if there's a 50% increase in the tariff.
Senator, thus far, that the critics of the tariffs, first we heard there's going to be a terrible recession, and the economic numbers have been robust, and then we heard there's going to be great inflation, and the inflation numbers overall are 0.1%.
Right, but my question, I'm a manufacturer, or I'm a farmer. I'm paying 25% more for fertilizer. My margin is tiny, 3 or 4%. And me as a farmer producer have to pay more for my inputs. You're telling me that I have to eat that cost, and I am not going to be absolutely required for my own survival to increase the cost to reflect the tariff that I pay.
Senator, I am happy to send you 2 articles, one from the Wall Street Journal, one from a Bloomberg columnist admitting yesterday that he has been surprised by the lack of inflation in the system, and the Wall Street Journal article saying, and this has been my supposition, that the Chinese business model is full of state subsidies. They do not care what they pay. It is a jobs program, so they will eat the tariffs.
Well, the farmer, the farmer I'm talking about is buying fertilizer from Canada, not from China. So I'm hearing you, and basically you're saying everything's going to be fine because the folks on whom the tariffs are imposed are going to eat that additional cost and not pass it on to the consumer. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Or the fertilizer producer in Canada will eat it to sell to your farmer. And I think it's very...
We'll see. I get it. We disagree on that.
Yes, but thus far, the empirical data is with me.
All right. This is sort of pretty hopeful on your part, and I'd say not particularly realistic. Second thing, one of the things that Vermonters are telling me, and everyone from farmers to businesses, is they need some stability and predictability. You'd agree with me that predictability and stability is absolutely essential for the well-being of an enterprise.
That's why I'd encourage you to vote for the tax bill and give great stability and predictability for taxes.
I'll take that. I'll take that advice under consideration, as they say, Mr. Chairman. But let me ask you this: predictability and predictability. The Trump tariff timelines, February 1, executive order, 10% on China, 25% on Mexico and Canada. February 3, 30-day pause on 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. February 10, 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum. March 4, an additional 10% on China, 25% on Mexico and Canada. This goes on and on. 22 different tariffs. And it looks like the president wakes up, kind of checks his mood, and changes the tariff regime. And I've talked to manufacturers where they've had products coming in to a port, and if they arrive on Monday, they're cool. If they arrive on Wednesday, it's going to cost them another $75,000. Just in terms of implementation, 22 different tariffs over the course of a few months.
Good.
Does that help? I'm mindful. This will be my last question.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Senator, if you're familiar with game theory, it's called strategic uncertainty, and it's also called negotiations. 13 days ago, on a Friday, President Trump threatened the EU with 50% tariffs. The EU was not negotiating in good faith. Within 10 hours, we had calls from 5 European leaders and a call with Ursula von der Leyen. So you may call this a flip-flop. I call this a negotiating strategy, and this is the way negotiating strategies work.
Vermonters call this pretty painful, and it's a way to run their business. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, I'll remind all senators we are under a strict 5-minute time frame for each senator. Senator Daines.
Chairman Crapo, thank you. Secretary Bessent, good to have you here today. I can't help but, as I was listening to my colleagues across the dais here, as you reminded them, we sat right in this very room during the Biden administration, and Lawrence Summers was warning about you can't be shoveling trillions of dollars of stimulus spending, unpaid for spending into the economy without being inflationary. Summers called it right. We called it right. They got it wrong. And that same CBO that got it wrong then is getting it wrong right now as it relates to this current battle we're facing on this amazing bill that will stop the largest tax increase in American history and will make some of the largest cuts, true spending cuts, to this runaway spending of the federal government in American history. And Secretary Bessent, I want to set the record straight on that and thank you for your leadership as we're moving through this very important process to get this bill on the president's desk by the 4th of July. So thank you. I want to talk a bit and dialogue on the China negotiations. You've been grateful for your leadership working through this tough negotiation right now with China. You've played a very active role in the ongoing trade negotiations. 42% of the world's economy is comprised by what happens in the United States in China, so this is high stakes. I recognize the need to hold China accountable on key agreements. I remember when Senator, now Ambassador Perdue, and I were in Beijing in September of 19 negotiating that phase 1 trade deal with Liu He back then. Thank you for continuing to work with China and holding them accountable to commitments made under President Trump's first administration. Safeguarding American IP, curbing forced tech transfer, ensuring fair access for U.S. farmers and ranchers, addressing unfair tariff and non-tariff barriers are all key priorities to ensure that we do have more fair and balanced trade with China. I want to thank you for the recent de-escalation on tariffs as you reach that Geneva consensus, as well as the President's efforts to bring China to the negotiating table. I truly hope these talks will continue and both sides hold up their end of the bargain. Secretary Bessent, what do you see as the next steps? You're right in the middle of this negotiation to secure a comprehensive deal with China that puts U.S. farmers, U.S. manufacturers, and consumers on a level playing field.
That's, in my mind, one of the single most important economic questions of the next few years. Will there be a continued decoupling between the world's two largest economies, or is it possible to rebalance together? Senator, President Trump would like the U.S. economy to rebalance toward greater manufacturing, bring down the trade deficit. The Chinese continue to add manufacturing capacity. Currently, they are 30% of global capacity, up substantially since 2020. Under the cover of COVID, they increased capacity. They are in the midst of a substantial real estate downturn. Some would call it a crisis. They have very low consumer spending. And so they need to rebalance to more consumer spending, address their domestic imbalances, but they cannot do that on the workers of the rest of the world. So if they are willing to be good partners and approach a negotiation where the U.S. brings back manufacturing, precision manufacturing, high-paying jobs, and the Chinese are willing to open their economy to American products, then we could do that together. But there's a lot of wood to chop there, sir.
When I was in Beijing in March, I met with Vice Minister Ma. Wang Yi was out of country at the time. I met with Vice Premier He Fang, and then finished my time there, those 48 hours, meeting directly with Premier Li Qiang. One of the issues that we brought up, and President Trump had asked me to push hard on this, was getting the Chinese to stop the shipment of fentanyl precursors into Mexico, as well as some into Canada, and even the United States, but the precursors. What are your thoughts, and what are you hearing right now from China in terms of their efforts to stop these precursors, the leading cause of death for 18 to 45-year-old Americans today?
Yes. So, Senator, there is a 20% fentanyl tariff on China right now. For the first time, that seems to have gotten their attention. What the senator from Vermont would have called a flip-flop, President Trump calls negotiating leverage. And so for the first time at both the talks in Geneva and the talks in London, they brought someone from the appropriate ministry to address this problem. And it is a real problem. And look, you and I, both have a lot of experience in dealing with the Chinese. You have more on-the-ground experience, but we know when they want their system to do something, it responds. And I believe that if they want to address these precursors, as they should, then we will see if we get a serious response. Because if they want to address it, they can fix it.
Secretary, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Mr. Secretary. I don't think anyone can argue with us that this bill will prevent the largest tax cut in American history. No one can argue that. But I think beyond that, as I look at this legislation, between the tax savings and other provisions, it'll mean $1,000 a month of hardworking Americans being able to keep in their pocket. And you mentioned some numbers. When I add them up, a family that's making $50,000, $100,000 a year will, I think, be able to keep $1,000 a month more of their hard-earned money. Can you add some background what you think it means to middle America?
Well, let's take the opposite tack, which I don't like to think about, Senator, is what happens if it doesn't pass?
Yeah.
It's the largest tax hike in history. It could mean a sudden stop in the economy. And as always, working Americans would get hit the hardest. They would lose their jobs. We would see substantial uncertainty in both the consumers and the business. What it does mean is that working families have a chance to cure this affordability crisis, this terrible affordability crisis that was brought upon them the past 4 years by this incredible inflation. So if we think about it, the affordability crisis is two pieces. the accumulated inflation, and that is affordability, and then the ongoing inflation. So thus far, Trump administration, we are getting very benign inflation numbers. And in terms of the accumulated affordability crisis, there are two ways to address that. We are trying to push down costs, whether it's fuel, healthcare, others, but the best way to address the affordability crisis is exactly as you said, for Americans to have higher real after-tax incomes. And that's what this bill does.
And ironically, it seems like I saw a figure last month that indeed that's what's happening in this last month or so.
The April number of 0.7%, 0.8% was outstanding, sir.
That's great. You know, I'm reminded of an old saying back home that figures lie and liars figure. And I'm just disheartened by some of the intellectual dishonesty that I hear going on in this room. But I don't think anyone can argue that this bill will prevent the largest tax hike in American history. We're going to cut, I bet, close to $2 trillion. You can't argue about that. We're going to secure the border. The child tax credit, again, taking your situation, it'll actually, we'll lose child tax credit, go from $2,000 to $1,000. And President Trump, 45, we increased from $1,000 to $2,000, now again to $2,500. Republicans leading the charge to increase the child tax credit as well. Go ahead.
And Senator, the important thing here, the child tax credit becomes permanent.
Oh, wow.
$2,500 is permanent.
That's good. Let's talk about the importance of growth. You and I have ran businesses. Yours are much bigger than mine. Need to go do a live hit here in a second, but yours are much bigger than mine. But we're used to data coming in, and all your advisors coming in, and the CBO is one of our advisors. There's so many advisors, but you and I are used to sitting there and saying, taking all this information and saying, based upon everything out here, we think this is what's best for this company, in this case, this country. When I look at this, the Trump policy, it spells growth. Growth in the economy, growth like we've never seen before. And I just want to give you a moment here to talk about how important growth is. And then absolutely we need to address the spending in this country. There's no doubt we have a spending problem. But the first thing we need is growth. We need to freeze our spending for all practical purposes. Again, recent numbers I think have been pretty good as far as growth of the economy. How is this bill going to impact the growth of the economy of this country?
Again, I think the certainty of this will help small and large businesses. I think the 100% expensing is going to be very powerful. As I'm out on the road, companies are telling me that they are holding back on CapEx because President Trump did say in his address to Congress there would be 100% expensing dated back to January 20th, but they can't be 100% sure that this bill is going to pass. Nothing's 100%. Especially in this town until it's done. I'm highly confident, and I think that we could see a CapEx boom here.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. Senator Young.
It's great to see you, Mr. Secretary. I know you're quite busy. And so I'd like to dive right in and start asking you about tariffs. Wall Street Journal says today, and what was a somewhat critical editorial, that they encourage a smarter trade strategy. A smarter trade strategy would be to work with allies as a united front to counter China's predatory trade practices. Instead, the administration has used tariffs as an economic scattergun against friends as well as foes, they say. I'll give you an opportunity to respond to this, Mr. Secretary. There are more than 140 countries that count China as their top trading partner. And of course, China has a massive domestic market and great productive capacity. And so they have a measure of leverage, and there's this dynamic that if we use tariffs, but not as part of a larger strategy, working with allies and partners, that we could be stealing market share from one another, and China will continue to manipulate prices. They will make dependency on their economy hard to reverse. And the alternative would be maybe what the Wall Street Journal proposes, which is we unify large economy, democratic countries, unify and collectively apply a lot of pressure vis-a-vis state capitalist countries, China in particular, to bring them into a position of better behavior. I feel like that there's something to be said for the strategy that they encourage. And the argument would further be, I'll elaborate on it, that if you don't adopt that sort of strategy, you just end up increasing input costs for many of our manufacturers in the near term, and behavior doesn't really change. What say you to this line of critique?
Thank you for this, Senator. Look, I think this is a multi-step process. Our allies have also taken advantage of us. I would say that the EU has been very intractable in negotiations. I had a back and forth with the EU official who said, well, your tariffs are terrible. I said, really? Then why do you have a 10% car tariff on us? And when we look at these things, we have many of our allies, including Canada, is about to enact a retroactive digital tariff, digital service tariff, because we have the greatest, really the only outside of China internet companies in the world. So they see a big pool of money. So we will deal with our allies. I warned my sister I was going to say this today. My sister and I fight all the time, but we iron it out and then move forward. That we will iron it out with our allies. When we put up the tariff wall on China,
yes,
I told our allies, especially the Europeans, and the Canadians and the Australians, this merchandise is going somewhere. Get ready for it.
Yes.
And unfortunately for them, I was right.
So Mr.
We are using the OECD, which China is not a member of, and we will see if China can be a reliable partner. So I think it's a two-step. Do trade deal, get the deals, get fair trade with our allies, and then we can worry about China.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly it. And then you can worry about China. You just articulated what I think the Wall Street Journal is encouraging. That's frankly what I've been encouraging for a number of months, which is reset trade relations, use the substantial concessions that the president has commendably been able to get from our trading partners, our major non-China trading partners, pocket those, maybe ask for a little bit more, and he's very good at that, reset trade relations, and then go after the big guy on the block. So to use your analogy, when there's a bully outside, get your sisters together and make sure they're with you as we work to bring them into position better behavior. I hope we see more of that moving forward. It's good to know that that's the policy
you're pursuing. And I would say that I was with the president in his trip to the Gulf states, and the president of the United States travels and comes back with substantial investment commitments from Saudi Arabia, from UAE, from Qatar. When the Chinese leader travels, he has to give money out. So the Chinese can only buy friends. The Americans have inbound investment, and we want to keep with this bill to make this the best location.
Yes, and we also want to make sure that as we ask for concessions from our friends, that we don't alienate them. This is always a balance, right? So they'll continue to come with bags of money and invest in the United States, knowing that it's not only financial incentives that drive them to invest in the U.S. and partner with us. I'm already a minute past my time. It's funny how this happens. Thank you for indulging me, Chairman.
And you're in deep trouble.
Yeah.
Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, there's no doubt we've had this conversation. Your fiscal policy is quite unconventional. And time will tell, history will tell whether you were right or wrong about it. Let me ask you this. Do you think the administration's tariff policy is an efficient way to generate revenue for the United States?
I think that it has several features. One, it is an efficient revenue generator. Two, it can rebalance decades of trade problems.
And was it your intent to impose those tariffs to counter the $2.4 trillion deficit that the reconciliation bill would impose?
Well, I don't agree with the 2.4 trillion number.
Was it your intent to raise the tariffs to counter whatever deficit the reconciliation had to pay for?
The intention, part of the intention with the tariffs has always been to raise revenues.
Right. But you keep, as my colleagues are talking to you, you keep countering the 2.4 deficit with the 2.8, saying that there is going to be a deficit. So they're not related, or they are related.
Your colleagues have a fixation on CBO, and
I'm just trying to. Listen. I don't want to get an argument with you. I'm just using your own words. I'm not here to argue with you. I'm just trying to understand what you're saying. So it doesn't matter. They're not related.
Sorry, they're coincident, not causal.
Okay. Perfect. That's all I needed from you. Let me ask you this. Do you think that tariffs are taxes?
Sorry?
Do you think tariffs are taxes?
No.
No, they're not.
No.
Okay. And you keep talking about utilizing tariffs to bring jobs back to this country, which I agree with. But I haven't heard from the administration or from you, what types of jobs in manufacturing are you looking to bring back with this tariff policy?
We'd like to bring back precision, high-end manufacturing.
But what type?
Look, it could be semiconductors. We obviously want to bring back steel. I think what we have seen, Senator, I think a good way to think about it, there are strategic industries that we discovered during COVID.
Such as?
The pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, steel,
So you want to bring those jobs back here, but anything else?
Sure, there's a whole array, whether it's auto
So
manufacturing.
I would ask that you give me the whole array, because if you have this in mind that you want to bring these jobs back, we should all be working together to focus on that. But I haven't heard this administration identify the types of manufacturing. So I would look forward to that. If you can send that to me, that would be
I'm happy to
great.
send you that, but again.
Let me ask you this,
And I know you're
Mr.
a business
Bessent.
person, and business is organic. This isn't the Soviet Union. We don't have a list of what's going to happen.
I know, but you're talking about moving into the 21st century and the jobs of the 21st century. I think they should be high-value jobs that we're all focused on, and I think there should be a plan, strategy around it.
I agree.
Any business needs that, right? Including government. Good. In a letter to investors that you sent in January 2024, you said that wrote that tariffs are inflationary and would strengthen the dollar. Hardly a good starting point for a U.S. industrial renaissance. Do you still agree with that?
No, that's been completely wrong.
Okay. There's been a lot of talk about small businesses and whether they're being impacted or not. If you would like to know the true impact, I welcome you to come to Nevada and sit with my small businesses. They are being impacted. There is uncertainty and chaos. I hear it from them all the time. They're concerned whether they can keep their doors open or not. I've heard from the trade ambassador that this administration has made the decision to look at short-term pain for long-term gain, quoted by the administration. And I don't think my small businesses are going to be around for that long-term gain because their doors are going to shutter. So what do I tell them as they are being squeezed by the tariffs because high costs are impacting them, the fact that they can't keep their doors open, and the fact that this administration really isn't looking out for small businesses across the country? What do I tell them?
Well, I would disagree with the idea that we're not keep looking out after small businesses, and small business optimism just hit a new record. So,
sure, so tell me what I tell my small business. It's not helping them to say, well, the secretary said that this policy is out there and you should be optimistic.
Well,
That's not working.
If this is my wish list, you could tell me you're going to vote for the tax bill and give them great tax certainty.
The tax bill will give them tax certainty. And the tariffs do not give them tax certainty. So the tariffs are going to continue, and that is the problem. If they cannot afford the goods for their products, if they cannot afford to keep their doors open. This reconciliation bill that you're pushing through has nothing to do with the fact that they still have to pay for those goods. I know I've gone over my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, and I just do have to insert here that if we don't pass this tax bill and extend the TCJA, those small businesses' tax rates are going to go up massively.
I understand that, Mr. Chairman, but we also have to recognize they're also going to lose access to their health care, and their health care costs are going to go up as well.
Well, we'll argue on that one. Senator Sanders.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, Mr. Bessent, for being here. Help me out here. My understanding is the Trump administration has, I think, 13 billionaires in office right now, leading government agencies. Is that about right, do you think?
I have no idea, Senator.
I think that's what the number is. Do you think it's a coincidence, given the large number of billionaires in the Trump administration, that this particular piece of legislation would provide $235 billion in tax breaks to the top 0.2% by expanding the exemptions in the estate tax?
Senator, I will tell you that when the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act passed, my tax rate went up.
Well, I don't know your exact situation, but I can tell you. Tell me about how many people do you think are in the top 0.2%?
Sorry?
Number of people in the top 0.2% who would benefit from this particular $235 billion tax break?
Well, the top, I know the top 10% is now paying 7%
That's not the question.
of the total tax.
My question is, why do you think at a time of unprecedented income and wealth inequality, when people like yourself economically have never, ever had it so good, why do you think it's a good idea to cut Medicaid for low-income and working-class people by $700 billion, to give $235 billion in tax breaks to the very, very, very richest people in this country, perhaps a few hundred families? Please justify that and tell me about that.
Well, Senator, I don't know, but the Democrats had the trifecta, and there was no tax increase or wealth tax on billionaires. You choose.
I'm not talking about a tax.
You chose not to do that.
Mr. Bessent, I am not talking about a wealth tax. Explain. A few hundred of the wealthiest families in this country, $235 billion tax break. Explain to the American people why you think that's a great idea.
I think that this will increase small businesses substantially. That most small businesses, they are...
Has zero to do, come on, you're smarter than that. This is the top 0.2%. This is not a mom and pop store. These are multi-billionaires, and the savings go to their kids after they pass away. This is nothing more than a gift to billionaires in this country.
Well, sir, that's just not correct, because the top 10% paid a bigger share of taxes after TCJA.
I'm talking about one provision in this. I don't want to argue with you about taxes in general. One provision, few hundred families, $235 billion in tax breaks. You can't justify that because morally it is totally unjustifiable. Let me ask you another question. If you guys want to cut $1 trillion in Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act, the estimate from CBO, I believe, is that over 15 million people lose their health insurance. Yale University and University of Pennsylvania estimated that when you throw that many low-income and working-class people off of health care, some 50,000 people a year will die. Tell me why you think it's a good idea to give tax breaks to billionaires and allow 50,000 low-income and working-class people to die unnecessarily?
Senator, first of all, that's overstated by 5.1 million. That is not attributed to this bill. It is simply...
It's a combination, that's true.
No. You all had a scheduled expiration of Obamacare subsidies, and you did not extend that when you were in charge. 5.1 million, 1.4 million illegal aliens on Medicaid.
All right,
and there are work requirements. And our goal is to get more money to children and others.
Really? Your goal is to get more money to children, and working people. Really? Come on. Do you know how many people, and I was surprised to hear this, I don't know if you know it or not, how many people lose their jobs every year, quit, get fired or whatever. Do you have any idea?
Well, there's something called the quits rate, and so when the job market is strong, more people quit.
But yeah, I was surprised that I just researched this. I don't know. Do you happen to know?
I don't know the number.
I was surprised. Would it be shocking to you? It was to me. 20 million people leave their jobs a year. Doesn't shock you, right? It's a big labor force, right?
Yep.
So some guy leaves the job, maybe they move, maybe something happens in their lives, right? We have a lot of transition in the labor market, correct?
Maybe they get a better job.
Right, exactly, maybe they do. Or maybe they have to stay home, their wife gets sick, whatever, we don't know. But 20 million people lose their jobs in a given year, leave their jobs in a given year. Are those people lazy? What happens when I leave my job and maybe I have to move to another state to take care of my ill mother? And I desperately need Medicaid. Am I too lazy now to be able to get Medicaid?
I think that's a mischaracterization of the work requirement.
Really? Well, I'm not quite so sure it is. I don't, okay. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I've been trying to keep everybody right at 5 minutes so that I can get out of here. I was supposed to get to the floor. That's why I was rushing everybody. That's not going to happen. And so I will just take another minute or two with you, Mr. Bessent, before we wrap up. You've received a lot of questions today about the $2.4 trillion score of the CBO. And you've explained very well that the president has raised a number of dollars in tariff revenue, and we ought to be looking at the combined activity, in my opinion, of what the president and the Congress are doing together, including this one big bill, as well as many other actions of the president and Congress.
And Senator, if I may for a moment, just to show I also interrupt Republicans, is that the CBO, I am not attacking the people who work at the CBO.
Sure.
I am attacking their methodology, and the methodology is completely illogical. It assumes baseline growth of 1.7 or 1.8% for the economy, if the tax bill were to expire and we would have the biggest tax increase in history. CBO still believes we're going to grow at 1.8%. I think we could see, there is a chance that we could see something maybe even approaching a double-digit decline. I don't think it would be that severe. On the other side, when we give permanence to this bill, when we reiterate and reinstate the expensing, we get no credit for the acceleration that we are going to see. And so that is why I reject the CBO scoring. That the $2.8 trillion in tariff revenue is, as I told the senator, coincident.
Well, thank you. You anticipated my question, and I'm going to just elaborate a little more and then ask you a final characterization here. The CBO does not use dynamic scoring, at least not very well. And as you indicated, in the CBO score that shows a $2.4 trillion deficit, it assumes that the economy is not impacted by the bill. That the bill, I'm reading, by the way, from a CEA report, and I think you're probably familiar with this report. Kevin Hassett is the one that shared it with me. And so I'm reading from the CEA's analysis of this. CBO's current 10-year economic projection assumes real GDP growth will average 1.8% over the next 10 years. Assuming an average growth rate of 3%, however, which is what is, I think, predicted to be a low assumption with regard to what the impact of this bill will be, it implies a $4.1 trillion additional revenue to be collected over that 10-year period. So I guess my question is, if we were to look dynamically rather than statically, and start with the CBO score, that is a static score, and then evaluate it dynamically in terms of what it will do. The CEA says if you just assume a conservative estimate of 3% growth in the economy, that you'll see $4.1 trillion of additional revenue. Could you just comment on that and your observation as to what you think the likely impact of this bill will be if you look at it in terms of what real revenue will start coming to the government?
Senator, an acceleration in the growth rate is a game changer and a trajectory changer, and we could start seeing a substantial debt paydown aside from any of the coincident tariff scoring. And my guess is that you then go into a virtuous cycle, because as you're paying down debt, the interest rates come down, and it would actually be even better. And I worked with CEA on that, and we actually, I think, did some fairly, I wouldn't call it harsh, but some very regimented modeling in terms of the outcomes and what the other variables would be. So there were people who were pushing for higher growth. There were people who were pushing for lower interest rates. And I think we used very, very realistic assumptions in there.
Well, thank you. What I heard you say was you think that the CEA analysis is solid and accurate and maybe conservative. And am I right about that?
I think it's extremely robust, and that I think it's important to have upside surprises.
So for those who want to continue to quote the CBO score, I think they should at least also acknowledge that there is a dynamic analysis, starting with that score, that shows what the real impact on the economy and the real impact on the deficit will be. And by my math, using the numbers in the CEA report, using the robust and very rugged analysis that they do, it would be a $1.6 trillion or $1.5 or $6 trillion deficit reduction rather than a $2.5 trillion deficit increase.
And Senator, other than the many other tragedies of COVID, one of the economic outcomes that was not allowed to happen was when you think about the 100% expensing for the period of President Trump's first term, that you eat the expensing in the front years, but you are really, however you want to say, cocking the spring, pulling the rubber band back, and then you get the full economic might of the new industrial equipment, the jobs that have been created. So COVID interrupted what I think would have been a very powerful path up because of that expensing, the creation of new capital stock, and the creation of new jobs.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate your analysis. I appreciate all the great work that you're doing. And I also appreciate you giving us the time you gave us today. And with that, I'm going to run to the floor, and so this hearing will be concluded.
Thank you.
Oh, wait a minute. Before I say that, I'm supposed to say to my colleagues, questions for the record are due on Thursday, the 19th. Close of business? Close of business by Thursday of the 19th, and now the hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.